thanks so much for coming. I really appreciate all of you for coming to the Wellness Open House. This is our first time doing this, and I'm just so grateful that you're all here and interested in kind of enjoying different aspects of wellness. For those of you who don't know, I'm Megan. I'm the owner and a therapist at Calm Mind Therapy, as well as some of our other therapists are sprinkled out throughout the staff, which is lovely. We specialize, we work with all people with all different types of presenting issues, anxiety, depression, general life stress, ADHD, and we also we specialize in working with kids and adolescents as well. So we kind of do everything, and then we have our little specialty population. But so our presentation, our title is self-care, and we have bubble baths and bonbons, because I do think oftentimes self-care is kind of presented as a kind of like a quick comment. You gotta go to the spa. You just gotta go take care of yourself. You gotta go get your nails done. And yes, like those are all forms of self-care, but if we look at self-care actually holistically, there's a lot more involved in what self-care truly is. And I think it's sometimes helpful to actually think about it in this broader term, and we're gonna create a self-care plan for ourselves towards the end of the presentation. All right, so what is self-care? And it's the practice of actively taking an active role in protecting your own well-being and happiness. So this is something that you are actively doing to kind of take care of yourself. And a lot of times people feel like self-care can feel selfish, like we are being lazy, we are just doing something that doesn't matter, or that isn't productive or counting towards productivity, when in reality self-care is actually what fuels us and nourishes us and makes us better forms of ourselves. So what it can do, it can reduce stress and anxiety, improve happiness, strengthen relationships, boost self-esteem, and actually a lot of other wonderful things. Because again, once we're kind of filled, we're actually able to give that to every other aspect of our lives. When we're really drained, we're not able to actually function and be the best versions of ourselves. And so it's like the opposite of self-care is the idea of burnout. So this is when we kind of go through a period of like intense stress, and it's either kind of emotional, physical, mental, in all areas of our life. A lot of times they talk about burnout in a work kind of context, but burnout really can show up in any area of our life. When we just feel like we're constantly running, and we're not feeding ourselves at all. And we also want to acknowledge, because I do think self-care sometimes feels like it's my fault that I'm not taking care of myself. And the reality is no, like there are so many personal, communal, familial, organizational, societal, systems that are actually in place that aren't really looking out for our self-care as much as we want to be. So sometimes we don't actually have full control over our levels of burnout or what we're facing in life because of these external stressors. So wanting to kind of take that self-blame out of it, where sometimes some of this we really can't control. It's not something that's in our control. And so the idea of coming up with ways that we can kind of take some control back or power back can feel helpful. And also kind of working to dismantle larger systems of oppression can be really helpful too. And so yeah, burnout is the opposite of self-care, So if we're feeling more burnout, that means we might have to assess where our self-care lies. And so oftentimes, we'd like to look at self-care in 8 categories, which I don't think we often think about it that way. We're probably doing it, but it's just not super common. So there are different ways that we can take care of ourselves and different areas in our life that we can care for ourselves. So there's physical, social, emotional, mental, spiritual, environmental, financial, recreational. Sometimes these lists are longer or shorter, but I like this one because this kind of encompasses everything in our life, which I think it's nice to look at ourselves as a whole versus just in small pieces. And so we're gonna kind of go through each section because it's all right, I understand the idea of physical, but what does it mean to physically take care of myself? And I just put up some just ideas of what kind of qualifies in the physical self-care category. And so this is anything that nourishes our body. So eating a satisfying meal, so having a lovely date energy bite. That is a lovely form of self-care. Making yourselves a beautiful meal. Even enjoying a great ice cream cone. That can be a source of self-care. Taking our medicine, engaging in our hygiene practices, moving our body in any meaningful way, drinking water, taking consistent sleep, and going to the doctors. All of these are ways that we're actually taking care of our bodies and doing things that are good for us. We also notice within this list, sometimes our self-care it's not the fun, splashy bubble bath kind of self-care. It's the chores, making our doctor's appointment, that doesn't particularly sound fun and nourishing and kind of seems like a chore, but in the scheme of things, that is actually the way we're caring for ourselves. And sometimes it's like worth almost shifting the perspective on the things that we like have to do, but versus like, hey, how can I take care of myself today? Or what are the things that I get to do to take care of myself more? So we also have social. So like spending time, humans are social beings. Like we need to be around others, connect with others, be in environments with other people. And this can be a huge way that we actually take care of ourselves and fulfill, like nourish ourselves. We have to also be aware that social is a spectrum. As with all of our self-care, we never want to be leaning too far on one side of it or the other. But some of us are extroverts and need a lot of socialization and social time. Other of us are introverts and need less of that socialization and social time. But there's ways that we can get kind of social, almost like filling that social category in different ways. And even like just going out in the world and like walking around other people can be a form of social, like self-care. Having a quick conversation with your barista can be a form of social self-care. Just letting us be around others can really help kind of fill up that need, along with going to parties, going to community events, things like that. And then we have like our emotional self-care. And as a therapist, big fan of this one, so I have to go to therapy as our top one, because that is a real space that is designed to purely be about your emotions, about how you are feeling. There's no judgment, there's no right and wrong. It's just a space to feel, let it all out, and get some validation, and then maybe build some tricks and tools to how to manage those feelings. But then we can also do that by talking to our supports about our emotions, or just like having a good cry. By crying, it actually, the build up to crying is our nervous system telling us that we're not okay, and by crying, it actually soothes that nervous system and allows us to get some of those feelings out. We can journal. We can like watch an emotional movie that matches the emotion we want to be feeling, or same with music, or even just like asking for help. Like these are all ways that we can take care of ourselves in an emotional capacity. We also have mental self-care. And so this is like kind of along the lines of like intellectual self-care. So like things that make us kind of like spark our interest levels. So, anywhere that we're learning something. So literally this can be, we learn something new on TikTok. That can be a way that we're sparking this like intellectual self-care. Or reading a book, completing a Wordle, doing a Sudoku, watching a documentary, anything that's kind of just getting our minds moving, interested, excited about something new, and like remembering, like learning new things and cultivating new ideas is really good for like long-term mental health and like our ability to kind of, fight like dementia and aging and all of that stuff. Then we also have spiritual, and like I like to think of this because I think if like you're really spiritual, you go to church, there's a religion that's involved, that's a really nice way to kind of easily use the spiritual bucket, but it doesn't have to be that. It's basically connecting with anything that feels greater than yourself. So connecting with something that feels like it's more than just you. And so this can be like spending time in nature, being around the natural world and understanding there is more to you than just, the little bubble you live in. Like look at all that's around you. Or I think even like engaging in cultural practices, like when we can really connect with our community and there's a greater purpose and something that's kind of beyond ourselves, that can feel kind of like a spiritual self-care. Or even like spending time with family, if we're going to a family gathering and we're seeing the generations there and knowing that, there is more beyond just us. These are ways we can kind of tap into spiritual self-care. And even practicing meditation, which is also a lovely way. Mindfulness, we did our Zen gardens out there. That's a way to engage in some spiritual self-care. Environmental. This again is gonna fall along the lines of like clean your room and take care of your space. But there is a reality to when we're in a space that is pleasant and enjoyable, we feel better. And so that can look like cleaning and organizing, but it could be planting flowers. It can be like moving to a community where we really feel fulfilled and we like being there, we like our surroundings. This can be like taking a work break and working at a coffee shop. Just getting a switch in environment can really change like how we feel, and even like traveling, going to a whole new place. All of those are ways that we can kind of change our environmental self-care. Financial self-care. Everyone loves talking about finances, but this is, and especially in our world, this is like a really big way to kind of take care of ourselves. And some of it can look like kind of, saving, long-term planning, making sure that we feel like we're financially stable and secure. But also this can include like buying something that really connects with your values, spending on money on things that really matter to you. These are all ways, investing in yourself, going back to school, taking a class, like these are ways that we are financially taking care of ourselves and looking out, using money in a way that is actually nourishing and fulfilling. And then we have recreational. So this is the fun one. So this is where, you know, going to the movies, spending time with friends, doing a bubble bath, having a really delicious bonbon, you know, dancing, going to a museum, anything that kind of falls into like these fun activities that we are doing, that would fall in our like recreational category. So a lot of times we kind of think of these as our primary self-care go-tos, but in reality, every single one of these is something that we're using for self-care. And so what I did for you all, because sometimes it's worth actually just taking a little self-care assessment of, you know, how are we taking care of ourselves currently, and maybe there could be ways that we could take care of ourselves differently in the future. And so like the first side, the front side, is just asking you to write down a few ways in each category that you are already taking care of yourself. Because also, we all take care of ourselves in so many ways, and sometimes we don't give ourselves credit for the really good things that we're doing for ourselves. And this really does matter, and almost if we highlighted this act as self-care, it's reinforcing that this is something good for us, and it almost like reinforces that we want to keep doing it. Like, this is something that is good for me, and maybe we can be more mindful of it in the moment. And so like, just like write down a few different things. They can be some of my examples. That was not an exhaustive list. There are many more things that can fall into that. And then we also want to start thinking about, like, once you fill in those categories, or even if you do like a mental calculation, is there a category that you feel really strong in, that you're like, I killed this category, I'm really good at my social self-care, I spend a lot of time doing that, it feels really rejuvenating. And then it's also worth thinking, is there a category that you're like, oh yeah, this one tends to fall, this one's a little harder, this one I don't enjoy quite as much. And just noticing, you know, which ones that you like, or which ones that are like already built into your day, and which ones that like maybe could use a little bit more, you know, time and energy put into them. And like also remembering, like, if we don't have our self-care where we want it to be currently, I like thinking of self-care in, not in the immediate, like, we do not have to leave this presentation and be like, okay, now I'm gonna go and join a yoga class and make sure I get all my, to talk to a financial advisor and make sure I get all of my dishes out of this thing. That becomes actually more stressful. So what I like to think of self-care is, where do we wanna be in our self-care plan in 1 year from now? You know, what are the steps that we might wanna make that in 1 year from now, we would look back at this plan and be like, yeah, I feel a little bit better about what I'm doing to take care of myself. And then we can even extrapolate that further of like, maybe in 5 years from now, where do I want to see? What changes in my life do I want to start making now, slowly, incrementally, that in 5 years I can look back and say like, yes, this is matching my self-care plan. And those can be like bigger life goals, like, you know, like changing a job, like moving to a new house, downsizing, like bigger things that could impact kind of our overall wellness and well-being. So it doesn't have to be immediate, it can be like short-term and long-term. Just take a few seconds.